Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a full tour of my Springbar Leisure Port. So the Leisure Port is Springbar's shelter, and it actually can be used as a tent as well. We're going to get more into that later in this video, but it's one of the most unique shelters on the market today, and a lot of that has to do with how you set this whole thing up. And it's a really fascinating way to do it. If you aren't familiar with Springbars and you don't know their setup process, stick around. I'm going to show you all the things that I like about this Leisure Port and all the things that you should consider if you're looking into getting one. Let's go take a look. So walking up to the Leisure Port, you have entrances on all four sides. I have the mesh panels currently rolled back right now, but when you come inside, you have, a pretty decent amount of space, but it's not fully squared off, so to speak. So you have to get a little bit clever with how you're putting things out when you're organizing tables and chairs and stuff like that in here. But as you can see, I can fit a pretty decent amount of stuff in here. So on this side of the Leisure Port, we have our dining setup. We have two of our Snow Peak Low Beach chairs. We have the single action low table. And then we have the single action my table as just a little accessory table on the end there. And there's plenty of room, for two chairs. You could definitely fit a third chair. We've also used this before with two chairs, and we have a bench that goes across one side. So on this side here, I have my 4-unit Snow Peak IGT setup, and this is where we do all of our cooking. We have our single burner stove on top, we got our cutting board, we have our full sink setup right here to the end, and underneath we'll have water storage, just extra storage in general, and our cooler. So this is a pretty nice setup to have, dining and cooking setup all within this shelter. So it is pretty cool to have this, especially in the summer months when the bugs are out. And that's primarily why I've been wanting one of these, is because, mosquitoes, flies, all that kind of stuff comes out in the warmer weather. So having a shelter like this is really nice, because as it gets to the evening, I can zip up all these panels and fully enclose it while still having really good ventilation. I feel like there's a ton of area, to move around and cook inside of here. Like there's plenty of floor space in front of this kitchen, which I really like. So I feel like divided up between, dining and cooking, this is a really nice shelter for that. And there's a ton of different ways you can set up inside of here. I've actually used it where I had my IGT unit and a cot in here, and I slept in this thing on my last camping trip. So the Leisure Port also has a full floor that will clip into all these different hooks down below. I've taken it out right now because when I use it like a shelter, I don't really like walking on top of that. You do need that in place when you're setting it up. It helps kind of create where you're going to stake out the whole tent. So you also have hooks that go throughout the entire roof panel of the Leisure Port here. And you can use this to tie ropes if you want, to hang different lights and stuff like that. You have plenty of head clearance in here. So I'm 5'8" for reference, and this goes well above, 6 foot. I think it goes to 6'5" if I'm not mistaken. And the cool thing about this shelter is that head height carries out throughout the entire parameter pretty much. I mean, these walls are near vertical, and you still have plenty of head height all around you within here. So height isn't going to be an issue. It's a really comfortable feeling space all around. So depending on how you arrange the furniture in here, you could probably fit, 4 people inside of it. I will say though, if you're getting 4 chairs inside of here, with more tables and stuff like that, you're definitely going to be losing this walking space that I've created right here. I'd say this shelter is best for 2 to 3 people, especially if you're going to be doing a full cooking setup like I have inside of here. Now, if you're just using it as a dining space and all your cooking is going to be taking place outside of here, I'd say you could easily set up, multiple tables going across, fit 6 chairs inside of here, have 6 people comfortably sitting around, and, that's an option as well. So it just depends how you're going to be setting things up. And I think there's a lot of versatility with this shelter. So we're in the shade right now, but you can kind of see how the light comes through the canvas fabric right now, and it just looks really nice, I think, inside of here. It creates a really nice, warm, kind of moody environment with the darker colorways on the panels. So you can fully zip up these panels as well. There's a toggle right here, and essentially as you loosen things up here, you can get your panel out, and it just zips in really nicely and easily into the top here. So something that I've noticed when I'm unzipping and zipping up these panels is this piece right here, this loop, can sometimes get caught right here on the zipper. So I've just made it a habit at this point to kind of pull that back as I'm zipping it down. And something else to notice is there are gaps at the top here. So, it's not fully bug proof, but it has done a good job on the last 3 or so trips that I've taken out on keeping most of the bugs out. There were some smaller little gnats that made their way in towards the ceiling, but none of the bigger bugs came in. And all I did was I essentially just kind of like folded this up like that and kind of tucked it out of its way. I wish there was a way to fully close this off. I don't really know that there is because there's no hooks or anything like that. But that's pretty much the best I could get it. On the fabric panels, there's actually like a little way to tie it which helps a little bit better. But on this one, you can really just do your best to kind of tuck it up into place. That's something that I wish there was a way that this could fully close up. At the bottom here, you have a nice little stake loop as well. I have used these on most trips as well, because if the wind picks up, this panel kind of just blows in. So I like to just stake it in the ground and pull it out. So when you do stake this out, I recommend not driving your stake all the way in the ground. That way you can unhook it if you want to still roll back your panels. But yeah, one of the coolest things about the Leisure Port is it only uses 6 stakes to get this thing fully set up. So all there is to set this thing up is laying it out flat, staking it in the ground, and then you're going to insert these rods into the sleeves at the top there. And essentially you're just going to be putting a little bit of tension on the ridge pole, and then it kind of springs into place, and you're sliding this cover over the middle right here to keep everything locked together. And after that, you're just lifting up the entire tent with the poles, and it's pretty much in place. So depending on the ground you're on, you may need to go higher or lower. So right now I'm on the 3rd tier up, but when I took this thing out to the beach in the sand, I had to actually go all the way up because my pole was driving farther down into the sand. So essentially the way these Springbar tents work is they're relying on these stakes to put a lot of tension down on the ground. So you have to use good stakes with these. They come with good stakes. I'm using just the Snow Peak number 40 solid stakes, but essentially, yeah, you got to stake these things fully in the ground because it's using a lot of that to lift this thing up. So yeah, you could imagine trying to lift this up right now in the position that it's in, it's going to be really difficult. So what I recommend is when you're setting it up, if you feel like there's a lot of slack going on right here, just lift the pole back a little bit and then extend it and then re-put it into place. So after you lift up the tent and put these poles up, that's it. You're essentially done. And I can't stress how easy this thing is to set up and how quick it is. So this entire thing, I could probably, depending on the ground, I could probably set this whole thing up in under 5 minutes. You know, 5 minutes would actually be a stretch. It might even be quicker than that. Really, the hardest part about this entire process is just staking in the tent, which is, with all tents, you have to stake them in the ground. I have heard of people using these lag bolts. As I'm going more and more, I'm really starting to consider the idea. Maybe I'm getting older, I turned 30, so, but essentially I'm thinking maybe use one of those impact drivers with the lag bolts, and it might be easier, especially in ground that I'm in right now where it's really rocky and really hard to get in. You know, one of these stakes might have taken me easily, you know, several minutes to get into the ground there, just because there might be tree roots and rocks and stuff like that underneath there. But I've heard with the lag bolts that it goes right into the ground and you can take it right out. I haven't used one. If you've used one, let me know in the comments down below. I'm kind of curious to see how those things work in different ground types. So these are all metal stake loops that wrap around the entire parameter of the tent. So also on the exterior, you're gonna notice there is no guy out ropes anywhere along my shelter here. And that's the case with all Springbar tents. And that has to be one of my favorite features because you don't have ropes interfering with your campsite. And you might be asking yourself, well, how sturdy is this thing in the wind if there's nothing else holding it down? And I will say these things are very sturdy. They have been tested in all different weather conditions, wind, rain, snow, and they are solid tents all around. And it all has to do with how they've designed the Springbar tension on top and the stakes that you're using. So as long as you're using solid stakes to keep this thing fully grounded, the rest of the tent, the engineering that went into that, that is going to take care of you in any wind or anything like that. I've never once doubted my Springbar tents in windy conditions. So while this is the way that I primarily use my Leisure Port with all mesh panels, there are different ways you can configure it as well. So there's different loops right here. So essentially what you'll do is you'll tension this thing down, stake it into the ground, and you can lift this up, and this will be your awning, so to speak. So you can put in different awning poles right there and tether that to the ground. Now it's a very tapered in awning towards the end of it, but you do have extra coverage towards the front section right here, and it helps open up the tent. I don't know that I would necessarily want to use this as an awning, to be honest. I would probably just tension this down and roll this up and have this whole side open. I think I like that open style a little bit better, but I like having the option where, you know, I can configure this thing in a bunch of other ways. So you can unzip all these panels and take them out and have a fully open shelter like this as well. So if you don't want any mesh and you don't want any fabric panels, you don't really need it. And essentially you're turning this into a tarp that drapes all the way down to the ground. So you can also put on a fabric panel as well, and this will create more privacy. So if you're planning on sleeping on this thing, or if you just want the extra privacy privacy so your neighbors aren't seeing in. You can fully zip these things up, and like I said, the fabric panel has these little tie downs at the top here which fully close it off. Now, I mean, there's still little gaps in between, but I mean, it's definitely more closed off than the mesh panel. Now, I think it would have been really cool if they just had a mesh and fabric panel all in one. So essentially the mesh would be on the outside of this panel, this would be on the inside, and you could kind of roll it down into its own little pocket, so to speak. And I'd be totally cool with it if it was just right about here. I don't feel like I need the mesh to go all the way down to the ground. I'd be happier if this was combined into one. But yeah, for now it comes as two separate panels, and like I said earlier, you get two of the fabric and two of the mesh. So yeah, if you're gonna want to configure it with all mesh or all fabric, you're gonna have to get an extra set. So when it comes time to take this whole thing down, the first thing you're gonna want to do is make sure that you put that floor fully in place at the bottom again. It's gonna make things way easier the next time you have to set things up. And I always try and make sure, you know, if there's things that I need to clean up on it that I see out here, I try and clean things as I go before I pack it up and let it dry out. Now, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have a good spot to lay this thing out when you get home to dry up, especially if you're packing up, you know, early. A lot of the times, depending on where you're camping, you know, checkout might be at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and things are still gonna be kind of damp. So you wanna make sure you don't keep this thing rolled up in your storage bag, you know, damp for the next time, because that is going to be a disaster. These are treated, you know, with waterproofing and an anti-mold treatment, but still you have to fully air these things out when you get home. So on the last trip, I took mine out to the beach, so I definitely got the full opportunity to test out how to clean one of these. And I found the best way to deep clean a Springbar tent is to just fully set it up, get out the garden hose, get a car wash brush. I actually have a specific car wash brush for my tents that I use, and just hose things down and just lightly brush down all the fabric. And you're gonna wanna make sure, like if you're going out in the sand and you're going out in places where dirt is gonna get in these zippers, to just get like a toothbrush and just go over these zippers really quick and make sure you fully clean those out as well. Sand and zippers just don't typically do well together, and over time it might cause your zippers to break. But yeah, I can't stress how important it is to make sure that you fully air this thing out, including the poles. Everything needs to sit out and fully dry, you know, for several days, and make sure those poles are dry as well, because you don't want to cause any additional corrosion and mold and stuff like that to your gear. So something else to keep in mind is these tents are very heavy. So you're talking all canvas and steel poles going on. I mean, in total, this whole thing weighs 50 pounds, and it does come in two separate bags. So, you know, about 20-ish pounds for the tent body, another 20-ish pounds for the poles. But yeah, they are big and bulky, but they are built to last a lifetime of camping. And if things were to happen down the line and go wrong, like say a zipper was to break or one of these metal loops ripped out somehow, who knows what would happen. You have Springbar there to take care of you, and they offer some of the best customer service. All right, well, that's pretty much gonna wrap it up for our tour of the Leisure Port. I wanna give a big shout out to Springbar for sending us one of these to try out on the channel. If you have any questions at all about the Leisure Port, be sure to comment down below. We can always chat more. I've also included links to the Leisure Port and all the gear inside in the description. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.